the beginning of not only the season with the kickoff game, first day, I believe, of the week 0 season, August 28th, when they get to take on East Carolina again after the bowl loss. So maybe that's a good thing for NC State fans. They get a little instant payback. They're a 12.5-point favorite in the game after they were a 7-point favorite in the bowl and lost in that one. And they've been going through a bowl drought. That also can't be very good for Dave Doeren, huh?
No, I mean, look, he tries not to put a whole lot of stock in it and says,
Sure.
we have our players sit out and things like that, for those games. But yeah, I mean, if you're looking for things that you're going to be upset with Dave Doeren about, that's probably going to be one that you're going to point out as well.
Okay, so what do you think about that opener? Because I see East Carolina has a lot of new players, and maybe that's the reason why they're a 12.5-point favorite, because I don't think anybody knows what to expect.
Yeah, look, for NC State going into that one, that is definitely one that they absolutely need to win. You can't afford to lose 2 straight to ECU. It's not, I wouldn't say it's a rivalry per se, because it's not a game where they constantly play it, nearly enough for you to call it that. But it is one where, look, there's some bad blood. I mean, early on in Dave Doeren's tenure, he lost a couple games to them. After they won a game, I believe it was in I can't remember if it was 2018 or 2020, like something like that. I think it was 2020, actually. It was a weird cycle. And, Dave Doeren said at the time, like, I've seen, a lot of ECU fans coming up to me with the hook and, kind of throwing it in my face. And he said famously, like, I wanted to snap that off. And they beat them by, multiple touchdowns in that game. I want to say they beat the brakes off them 2 straight games. And, because they ended the 2020 season with one against them and then came into the next season against them. So very similar to this situation. But, ECU was a surprise team last year. They fired their head coach. They retained the interim coach based off of what he was able to do at the end of last season. But they lost a lot of talent in terms of their backfield this past season, in terms of wide receiver position this past season, and on the defensive side of the football. They keep their quarterback. They have, several pieces back from last season, including Anthony Smith, who's a former NC State wide receiver who transferred over there. So he, I believe, if I remember correctly, was one of their lead wide receivers last season. I can't remember if he led them in yards, but he was a big play wide receiver for them last year. So there will be a little bit of bad blood there. But again, this is 100% a game that NC State feels it can win and feels it should win going into the season.
Yeah, especially the first game of the season. NC State's going to have, even though they have a lot of turnover too, but they've got a lot more coming back and home and payback. Yeah, you can understand why they should be the double-digit favorite there. National championship is not going to happen. We know that. They're 50-1 to win the ACC, so that's a big number. It seems like just a year or two ago they were probably 10-1 or somewhere in that range. That's the usual number. So to be 50-1 is a little bit surprising. They're co-10th choice right now as far as Vegas is concerned with Pitt, and the over/under total 6.5. So the under is 6.5 minus 150. The over is plus 125. So it's actually, believe it or not, it's actually leaning under the 6.5. And I looked at the schedule, and you do see that there are 5 really tough games, 4 of them on the road: Duke, Notre Dame, Pitt, Miami, the Georgia Tech home game. And then those last 2 games that are home to end the season are probably the games that will determine whether or not I think they go over the 6.5. As long as they can take care of business at home against Florida State and North Carolina. Because as you know, of course, they have beaten North Carolina 4 straight times. They've beaten them 3 straight as dogs. So, I mean, what do you think? Do you think they're a 7-win team?
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think, I would say those first probably, 6 games are extremely critical for NC State. You have to be able to kind of set the stage. If they're able to find a way to go 5-1 in those games, at home against ECU, at home against UVA, and then going on the road against Wake Forest and Duke before coming home against Virginia Tech and then Campbell, that to me, if you're able to find a way to beat ECU, beat UVA, beat Wake Forest, who should be a team that you can win against. Now, it's always been difficult for NC State for some reason to go into Winston-Salem and win those games. But given this is a Thursday night game, given this is a a game for NC State that, you didn't have too difficult of tests to start the season. Hopefully you come away with a 2-0 record from those first two. You go into Wake Forest with a little bit of steam, a little bit of momentum, and a chance to win that game. Again, like you said, Duke is going to be the really difficult one out of those first 5 games or first 6 games for NC State. And then Virginia Tech is always going to be kind of a weird one. We'll see what Virginia Tech is capable of this year. But if they're able to find a way to go 5-1 in those first 6 games, that really sets the stage for them to get at least over that 7-win mark, or try to get to that 7-win mark, because as you mentioned, it's really backloaded in terms of difficulty for NC State. They have that last game against Notre Dame before they get their bye, before you get that real bye week for NC State. And then you go on the road to Pittsburgh before facing Georgia Tech at home, before going to Miami, and then closing out the season against Florida State and UNC. If they slide in those next 4 games after going potentially 5-1, those last 2 games are going to be really, really critical because Florida State, UNC, we don't really know what to expect from either one of them going into the season. Obviously, they both try to load up a little bit through the transfer portal. UNC lost a lot in the spring window in terms of what they had from the previous regime. And Florida State, we'll see what a guy like Thomas Castellanos is capable of. We'll see what, they were able to kind of build around him in terms of the offense. But, man, they were really down last season. And I don't know that they're necessarily going to take that leap with Thomas Castellanos going into this season that they had back in 2023. So, that's going to be an interesting ending for NC State. But you've got to come away, I think, at the very least 5-1 from those first 6 games. If they're able to win against Duke, that would be huge. But you can't lose 2 of those first 6 games, because then you're really setting yourself up for a difficult end to the season with those last 6 games, based off of the fact that 3 of the toughest games are on the road, and then those 3 home games are against teams that we really don't know what any of those teams are capable of in the ACC going into this year.